Watch Canada, and my role in Toronto is to do investigations if there's problems or with coyotes in a certain area. Also to promote and to give you facts on how to deal with keeping coyotes away, or how to deal with the dog situation and coyotes as well.
Thank you. So we want to start, and also too, like I live at Lansdowne Square on Spartan, and I had a meeting there with all the residents because we're just next to the Humber River, and we have tons of coyotes in the back, you know, where the dogs are, and so that was a big concern for the residents that live in those buildings as well. And we had about 50 residents that attended that meeting, and it was a very successful meeting. So I'll pass it now on, and they can give you your presentation, and then we can open it up for questions.
So what I think we'll start with, we'll start with Toronto Wildlife and Coyote Watch Canada, just to talk a little bit about what is normal and things that we can see around coyote behavior, and then we'll talk about, and then I'll jump in about what Toronto Animal Services does in relation to all that information.
And just as we go through, please feel free to add on as I'm talking. This is a long presentation that I'm going to skip through quite a bit of it if you want to add.
I'll jump in.
There's a microphone here. Yeah, maybe that would be better.
Hello, everybody here okay? Excellent, okay. So, we'll just give you a little bit of background, and Anne, please feel free to jump in at any time as well, if there's anything that you want to add. So, coyotes, they are, related to dogs. They are all from the Canis latrans family of animals. And that's why, too, that we see a lot of issues sort of sometimes coming up between coyotes and dogs that we've been seeing in Liberty Village, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Just sort of the history of coyotes. We often hear this term of coy wolf. Has anybody heard that term of coy wolf? Yeah. So that's not something that we typically use to describe our eastern coyotes. It's a bit of a slang term, but essentially, as this map shows, coyote and wolf populations intermingled about 100 years ago. So our eastern coyote today does have some wolf genes in them, as well as some dog genes, which I don't know if Anna wants to speak to later, maybe. But all that to say, that's completely normal. The eastern coyotes that we see in our neighborhoods today are the same eastern coyotes that were wandering our neighborhoods 100 years ago. There has been some change in the last 100 years. We did see the term coy wolf in the media quite a bit in the last 10 years or so, but just to be rest assured that something hasn't changed with coyotes recently. Sorry, that's just I'm flying through this. This is actually a much longer presentation that I'm going through a little more quickly. So just to kind of give you some perspective on the size of coyotes, because of course, people can be intimidated when they see them. So, we have in the blue there, that's about the rough size of a wolf. The green figure there would be your golden retriever dog, and coyotes in the black. And then the smaller blue would be foxes. So coyotes typically, they're about 30 to 35 pounds, the ones that we are bringing into Toronto Wildlife Centre. They are tall, they're very fluffy, so they can look a lot bigger than they actually are. They're typically tall and pretty lanky. So I'm just going to skip through some of these things. So one of the things I do want to talk about why we see them a lot is because they are a very intelligent and highly adaptable animal that will make use of urban spaces. Sometimes people will ask us at Toronto Wildlife Centre, well, where did they come from? And the reality is that they have always been here. They do move around a lot. They have quite large ranges, but they haven't come in from elsewhere, right? It's not like we have this vacant space in the city that they don't live in. They've always lived here. And when we start seeing them more often, usually it's a sign that there might be an attractant around that's causing them to come near, or it could just be that they're out and about more because they're denning, they're raising pups. We also tend to see them more in the winter when all of the leaves are off the trees. So a lot of what we see, unfortunately, the stories that we hear about coyotes are actually quite misleading. You know, we've even heard stories growing up, right? The big bad wolf, lots of different stories. And in the media, we do hear a lot of triggering language about coyotes. Now, sometimes there are incidents, but they are extremely rare, right? Coyote attacks on humans, it's a very, very rare occurrence for even a bite or a scratch to occur. There was a study done back in 2010 that found across Canada, on average, there was about 2.5 bites or scratches from coyotes to humans every year, compared to over 400,000 dog bites and scratches on humans. And I think that's important to realize because it does just give us some perspective in terms of the problems that may are created more from the sensationalization of them.
I'm just going to jump in there
Yeah,
really quickly here. Just on that topic, because I don't want us to lose our trail of thought. Now, one of the questions that comes to Toronto Animal Services every time we talk about those kinds of statistics, well, we reported we got bitten, and again, there's a sensationalism that is taken on. But for example, there's usually something, if a person is injured, like for example, I know of a case where a person was bitten, but they were reaching in, right? They actually tried to kick the coyote, and the coyote bit their feet.
They're feeding it, right?
Yeah, or they're feeding them, but in this particular situation, then it became a sensational headline of the coyote bit my foot. But what they did not tell was what was happening before the coyote bit their foot. By the time we can even clear that narrative, because we also don't want to seem insensitive to the victim's experience, the fact is there's usually some other aggravating factor. Or we've seen situations of people or dogs that are wandering in the ravine, for example, and they happen upon a den, or they want to try and take a picture of the pug, right? So there's usually aggravating. So when we talk, so yes, those situations happen, but what Vicky's talking about human attacks, we're talking about actual coyote abnormal behavior. Hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you, yes, that's a really important clarification. So I'm going to move on from that a little bit, but just, to say too that even the word attack is often misused. Oftentimes when people say there's been a coyote attack, what they actually mean is a coyote encounter, and that may have been scary for them, it may have been very close to them, but there wasn't necessarily contact made. And we know this too just from speaking to people through our hotline. When we sort of dig a little deeper with the story that they're telling us, we do find out that that's what has often happened. So just kind of getting into some myths that we often hear about coyotes, that they stalk people or their prey, stalk people and their pets as prey. Has anybody heard that one before? Yeah. I don't know, and I don't want to take up this all the time. Do you want to talk to escorting at all? Or?
I'll go right ahead.
Okay, all right, okay. I don't want to take up all the time here. So it's definitely true that we do have to be careful with our pets, right? Especially our smaller pets like our cats or small dogs. It can be confusing for a coyote to sort of necessarily tell the difference between its prey, like a rabbit and a cat. To a coyote, those are both opportunities for a meal. And of course, they need to hunt to survive. So, for cats especially, we do recommend keeping them indoors or supervising them outdoor, keeping them on leash, keeping them in a cat-safe, predator-proof enclosure. Smaller dogs, coyotes are not stalking them as prey. Sometimes it may be that they see it as an opportunity for a meal, like we have a small chihuahua, for example. But other times it may be like the dog might be coming a little bit too close to their den site, and they may be just warning that dog off of that area. What we do hear a lot from people, especially that are walking their dogs, is that they are being stalked by a coyote. And we see that a lot at this time of year, especially as they're denning and having their pups. What has actually happened is that coyote has perceived that that dog and that human have walked into their territory, right? So Coyotes don't know what our city boundaries are, or that parks are for everybody. They stake up space and they think, okay, this is my home here. And they're, you know, they're pretty patient in their territory. They're not chasing everybody down. But if you are in that area, they are going to watch you and make sure that you leave their territory. So I always like to kind of compare it to if you were in your house and you were looking at out your window and a stranger walked up onto your property, you would probably look out your window and be like, why is that person standing there? And even if they start walking away, you might kind of follow them and be like, this is kind of weird, I'm going to make sure that they keep going. And even if they walked further down the street, you might poke your head outside your door, just kind of look down, follow them down a bit just to make sure they're gone. So that's very much what a coyote is doing when it's following people. It is what we call escorting them out of their territory. Would either of you like to add anything?
I just want, sir.
Sorry. I just want to bring up one other point, and that is that if you have your dog or your cat in your backyard to be safe, please remember that there are also owls and hawks that live in your area, and you must be careful because they do come down for a small chihuahua. And I actually have got a video that I'll send to Vicki so that you can see it. A friend of mine left her dog in the backyard, which was maybe the size from here to the door. And the hawk landed right beside the dog and tried to get him. So please don't think that only coyotes are in your area. You have to watch for ones that are in the air as well.
No, I just wanted to add real quickly, just to something that Vicki mentioned, because this is a question we get asked all the time. Well, what do you mean that they're here, you know, just escorting you out of their green space? This is my space, and what do you mean they've always been here, but I've never seen them before like this? I think most of us here, if you've been living in the city of Toronto for a while, if you think about what our architecture and our infrastructure looked like 10 years ago, to what it is today, I think that should be a humbling reflection about the environment has changed. You know, it's the joke I usually say to people, and it's not to make light of the situation, but the joke of why did the coyote cross the street? He was just trying to get to the other side. That's honest to God the answer, because they use corridors when they move. And we have built subdivisions and housing and different construction projects right in the middle of their corridors, and they've learned how to navigate that space. But during that space, we have their dens, they set up their homes, their lives, and they just don't want you too close to them. And you know, something that's really interesting, and I hope that this is, it's a bit of a triggering comment, but I think it's really important. For example, the dog that was killed down in Liberty Village was recovered intact. Coyote did not devour him or eat him or even attempt to eat him, right? So the whole idea that they're hunting them as prey was dead in the water right there, because the animal was not eaten in any way. It just wanted to get rid of its competition and its threat.
Thank you, Jasmine. And just to reassure people as well, I was the proud owner of a 4.5-pound Chihuahua for many, many years. And I live in the beaches, which we have a large coyote population there. And you know, I think one thing to keep in mind if you do have small pets like that is that you do always have to be very aware of where they are at all times. So I never did let him go outside on his own. If I was outside with him, he was right beside me on a short leash. We recommend no longer than 3 feet long. And I would pick him up, you know, if there was ever any kind of danger. He was attacked one time in his life. However, it was not by a coyote, it was by my neighbor's off-leash dog. Again, I think that's another important thing to keep in perspective. It's a big German Shepherd, he's very lucky, but that happens much more often. So again, just keeping these incidents in perspective. We don't want to necessarily go not as coyotes or dogs, but just sort of understanding their behaviors and how we can take responsibility for them. All right, myth number 2. So coyotes lure dogs away from their homes to ambush them. So that's another one sometimes that we hear, but a lot of the times, you know, dogs are playing. They do what dogs tend to do. And any one of us that knows or has had a pet dog knows that they love to chase things, right? So oftentimes when we see an interaction, especially with a larger dog and a coyote, It's not that the coyote has stalked them or ambushed them, it's in fact that the dog, often off leash, has started chasing the coyote, and the coyote is reacting defensively. And I will say that, you know, coyotes do have quite a bit of patience, but they will have a limit, as any living creature would, right? And if it's being chased, that's quite a terrifying incident for those coyotes. We know that in Liberty Village too, that the coyotes there, as so many people are following those stories, that they were harassed regularly by off-leash dogs. And that can also lead to changed behavior by the coyotes, right? They may start acting a little bit more defensively if they are repeatedly chased by off-leash dogs. So I'm just gonna skip through some of it. This is a long presentation and we don't have time for everything today, so I'm just kind of getting to some of the other key points. Did you want to add anything about dogs in Liberty Village or anything like that?
Okay, and they can always contact us if they have more questions.
Perfect. So one question that we are getting a lot right now is why can't we just relocate the coyotes? So every animal has its home range where it knows where to find food, it knows where to find shelter, it's carved out its niche or its territory. If we trap and relocate wildlife, studies have shown us that they just simply don't survive the move. It's an incredibly stressful thing for them to have to go through. And when they are moved into a new location, oftentimes they do have a hard time establishing themselves. And in the case of coyotes too, we have those territorial issues where they're very likely going into the area of another coyote, and it may not go so well. So trapping and relocating, it isn't an option for any wild animals. There are even laws against relocating wildlife by the Ministry of Natural Resources, the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Act. You can't actually move an animal more than a kilometer away. So in the case of coyotes, they do have wide ranges where they move around on their own, but a kilometer, you know, a coyote could very easily also come back to that same location. Also, if we're having incidents with a coyote, it really isn't fair to move it into another community as well, right? So what we really advocate for is that we are learning how to properly coexist with these wild animals, sort of taking responsibility for the things that might be attracting them or causing any issues in the first place. Anybody want to talk about pet safety or
No, they have a flyer that I gave you.
Why don't you come speak to that?
Okay.
Sorry, I want to monopolize all this.
Do you have that bag with you tonight?
Oh, I do have a bag, yes.
Yeah.
So I passed out to everybody a flyer that's called For the Love of Leash. And this has a lot of information on how to keep your pet safe and how to make sure that the dog is not off leash running around and chasing other animals as well as coyotes. One thing that we do recommend is that you only have a short lead. I have a beagle, so I have a 4-foot leash, and he does not have a collar because many dogs can pull themselves out of the dog collar, so we have a harness and we have a collar on him, so that a double leash. Beagles tend to be gone in a minute, so that's why we've done that. But if you have a dog, please make sure that the collar is on securely, okay? Because otherwise, you may not realize how fast they can get out of that collar on their own.
Yeah, very good point. And I already mentioned earlier, the 3-foot leash is what we recommend. Retractable leashes are a problem, right? Especially with small dogs. We have heard stories where the lead is, 15 feet long, and Coyote has kind of taken that small dog because it's quite a distance from its owner. You want to keep them really close by to you at all times. Like I mentioned, picking up the small dogs, don't let them outside. Oh, this is a video of a coyote jumping a fence, just to kind of let you know, like, they are good climbers. So even if you have a fenced-in yard like this, that is not keeping a coyote out.
Or a fox.
Or a fox. So, your cat or your small dog that's wandering around outside is still at risk in a backyard like that.
The ministry's website as well has a lot of recommendations. Nothing beats actually supervising your pets, but there's lots of different ways, like coyote rollers, and just making sure that there's not attractants in your yard. And I think to Vicky's point about the relocation, we've been talking about part of the reason we're seeing conflict is because there's something attracting them, whether somebody's intentionally feeding them, and unfortunately, my office is way too many people. And sometimes the feeding is not necessarily for the coyotes. People are throwing out peanuts, and they're trying to feed other animals, like the pigeons or the seagulls, and then they bring the squirrels in, but the squirrels is what the coyote is feeding on. So if you create a honey pot of squirrels, why work hard when you can work smart? Right? So that's part of the reason that the prohibiting feeding of wildlife was passed, because of the kind of rippling effect that it has. So ultimately, we have dogs harassing wildlife. We have attractants, whether direct or indirect. We have changes in our infrastructure in our city. And ultimately, part of the reason we'll talk about aversion conditioning, and this is why we talk about peaceful coexistence, is we want to educate a coyote to live with us. He needs to understand that that's his space out there, and this side of the street is mine. And why is it not as simple as just keep relocating or euthanizing them? Because coyotes have been there for hundreds of years, and all we're doing is creating a systemic problem. It'll keep happening. Another coyote is going to move into that space. They're going to have access to the same food, the same triggers, and the issue will just keep happening. So we're not actually creating a solution that is long-term.
Question at the back?
Yes, I have a question. How could somebody that can't see be aware of what's around them?
Yeah, so I think, of course, it might, make that more difficult. I wouldn't want to speak to what your specific situation is, but I think a lot of the same things apply. So, for example, do you have a pet at home that you're concerned
No, I have a
about?
guide dog, which is different.
A guide dog, yeah. So your guide dog, I'm assuming, would be kept close to you.
Short leash, yes.
Yeah, exactly. So right there, that's a really strong safety measure to protect yourself. It is highly, highly unlikely that a coyote is going to come out of nowhere and attack a dog that's right beside you like that.
Well, it could, because some parks have been put back to nature, like Jasper Park, and it could be hiding in the weeds, whatever. She might not see him, but he will see her. So I'm a sitting duck and she's a sitting duck.
Well, one of the things what is interesting about the comment, and this is why we talk about a community response, like no one person is responsible. And I say this because this is one of the common conversations we have with people who feed. You are fine. You are comfortable with this animal coming to your backyard. The rest of the community, or the vulnerable poor people in your community, the people who have different challenges in the community, are not as prepared as you, and you are creating a problem, and unfortunately it becomes this bigger issue where everybody is affected. So that's why we ask for it. It's no one, if we as a community consistently, and that's one of the things as well we find with coyote aversion, we'll talk about, and that's why I like coming to these community events, because I want everybody to have the same information. If we do it consistently, if we keep our yards clean, if we do see a coyote that is kind of like looking he's a little too curious, coming too far, and we all deploy aversion conditioning, returning him to his space, then we look after our community in that regard as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in terms of coyote behavior, you have to remember that as wild animals, they're always looking out for their own safety, right? So it's really not in that coyote's best interest to ambush you and your dog out of nowhere, right? So they might react if they're being chased because they might need to defend themselves. But to sort of, just out of nowhere, attack, if that kind of behavior is happening, like we have seen a couple times in Liberty Village, there's usually a reason for that. Liberty Village is a very kind of unique situation. It's not typical at all of coyote behavior, and we know why they're behaving that way, right? These are what we call trigger-stacked coyotes. Like I mentioned earlier, they've been chased and chased and chased and chased, so they're almost on edge, right? They're very stressed animals. There's also some suspicion that, they may have originally been an Ontario place when all of the when all that was torn down. We don't know for sure, but it's a possibility. So if they've lost their home, they're being chased regularly by dogs, that becomes a very stressful situation for them. It makes them behave differently. But, a normal, like a coyote behaving normally is actually going to move away from you, not closer to you. Yes.
Okay. So, okay, I'm losing my train of thought. I'm under the understanding that coyotes go after the small dogs and not so much the large dogs. Am I not correct? They're not going to try to get something that's as big as them.
It's not typical. I mean, we can never speak in absolutes, right? However, it's highly, highly unlikely that, we don't see that happening a lot. Maybe Jasmine can speak. I'm not sure if you keep records of that at the city. What we hear more of is the smaller dogs.
Yes.
When they are not sort of close and off-leash. And by smaller, I mean like under 10 pounds, like a small dog. Because anytime a coyote is entering a confrontation with another animal, there's the chance that they can lose their life, right? So
They can lose what?
They can lose their life, right? Like it could be life-threatening for them to engage in those kinds of interactions with other animals. They can become injured, right?
Okay.
So self-interest for wild animals, they want to protect themselves. It doesn't mean they won't defend themselves if they perceive a threat,
Okay.
but they're not looking for altercations, right? I think that's an important thing to remember.
I've still not done
And
that.
I think one thing that's important, on the odd time, like she said, like he said, it's very rare, but for the odd time that there is a conflict between a dog that is a bit larger, there is something else happening.
Okay.
Either they've gone into a space where they're probably eating, or there's a den, or they're walking. You're not just walking in an open park with a large dog, and it's just deciding to do that.
True. Okay, so I'm not done because I
Sorry,
gotta get
Anne also
everything
just brought up a really, I'll get to your next question in 1 second.
Okay.
But again, just going back to the perception piece, we have to remember also that your dog is much more likely, again, to be attacked by another off-leash dog, right? So when we're thinking about threats, we have to keep these things in perspective. There's always risk. We walk out of our house, and there are just risks in the world. Coyotes, on the grand scale of things, are way down here, like really, really low down. So when we're concerned about another canid attacking your dog, again, from my own personal experience, and that's not the only time I've had a dog that's been attacked by another dog, that's a much, much higher risk, right? So, yeah. Okay.
Okay,
Did you want to add
so,
No, I just want to confirm that, because I can definitely confirm that in my office, because we investigate all kinds of dangerous acts, and I can definitely say that unfortunately, it's a sad reality of my staff's day-to-day that there's a lot of dead dog victims, usually resulting from dog-on-dog interaction, dog-on coyote. It's they're all dog-on-dog. That the percentage is so negligible for the coyote interaction. It's sad, but it is a reality.
So just so I concur, so a lot of them that we're seeing, and we have a problem at Liberty Village, but even in this area, where there's ravines, right? Where there's a lot of ravines, that's where you'll see them. They'll come out. And I know at Lambton Square where I live, we have the Humber River, and people have their dogs out without a leash, so the dogs are running around, and then the coyotes remember we had that meeting. So they're mostly around where there's ravines and people feeding them, and it's important that people, when they have their dogs, that they're on a leash, because a lot of them just let their dog run around. Even if it's not an off-leash dog park, they just let them run around, and that's where you run into an altercation. Am I correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
okay. So, have you guys heard of the incident that happened at Downsview Park? This person happens to be a friend of mine. She told me the whole story. Her dog on leash, small dog, next to her by her leg as she's leaving the park, going on the sidewalk, okay? A bus driver points out to her, look, there's a coyote, be careful. Well, she'd never seen a coyote before. She thought it was a dog. So what did she start to do? She turned her head and said, where's the owner? That thing swooped in and took her dog. And she chased it through the park and was beating it with a stick. But at one point she realized she wasn't going to win. The dog's in in the coyote's mouth, and now the coyote's starting to growl at her. So she knew that she's gonna be next, he's gonna attack her, okay?
So
So
I
it
think-
was a very sad story. Have you
Yeah,
guys
but-
heard this?
Yes, but you know what's really sad? Do you know what caused that conflict?
What?
People. Because a couple of weeks earlier, there were about 10, 20 photographers baiting those animals. And we
Doing what?
spent, they were baiting them.
Putting out food.
Putting out
Oh.
food because they wanted the perfect shot. My staff spent hundreds of hours there trying to get them to leave. That is private land, that is crown land. They had to hire private security to get those people out. And this is what we're talking about, that when we do certain things, we affect animals' behavior. So it's not out of the blue. There was a lot of other aggravating factors happening, and then somebody innocently suffers the consequence to that.
Yeah, but if there's a lot less coyotes, there's a lot less chance of that happening to anyone. So therefore, the amount of coyotes that are in the city should be contained.
Yes, and it's not being.
Okay, and it's not, you guys don't care of any coyotes or any raccoons. Who cares? The homeowner or the resident?
They have just as much
Whatever.
right to be here as you and I.
Coyotes are down on Bremner Boulevard,
so-
downtown. What are they
So
doing
we
there?
will speak to that, okay? So-
One at a time,
Yeah.
please. One at a
So we
time.
can understand your concerns, and because they are a wild animal, that fear factor goes up. But I want you to stop and think about in that horrible situation, which of course I'm a dog owner, I'm a cat owner, I'm a bird owner, I love animals. I would be devastated if any of my pets were attacked and killed. But I want us to kind of just stop and think for a second, what if that same situation happened, but it was another dog? Would we still have this visceral reaction?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, but then we have to think, that happens 400,000 times a year across Canada on people.
Tame the owners.
Yeah, it's
But
the
that's-
owner's fault.
Tame the
But
owners.
I think the thing is,
One at a time. And
Yeah.
I think you have a question there too.
yeah, I just want to finish sort of addressing this one thought
Yeah.
first. My point is that a lot of times we differentiate between risks and harms that come to our pets as a result of wildlife versus other risks and harms. Anne spoke, an owl could take your small pet,
Yes.
right? A hawk could take your small pet. If they're off leash, they could get hit by a car. They could eat something in the park that could harm them.
It's terrible.
Our world is not risk-free, right? And, for many of us, it can actually be a wonderful thing to have these wild animals around us. And it's really important, like Jasmine spoke to just there, that we understand why they are behaving that way, right? Because this coyote is now being vilified because of what humans did. Okay.
What's the fine for baiting or feeding wildlife? For example, I think in one of our parks, there's somebody that brings their leftover, chicken wings and whatnot. And I wonder if we had a way to make sure that that was something we really focused on. Would it be a reporting system or a fine system or a combination of the two?
Absolutely, you can phone that into 311. There is absolutely a fine associated.
How much is the
with it.
fine, just so we know?
I think it's $365.
Not enough.
Raise
I
it.
wonder if
So-
this could be something where we could focus our energy to say, maybe this is maybe there's the odd person who isn't aware. It takes one bad apple, and the next thing you know, we have a pair of coyotes that run down Marie Baldwin and up Florence Crescent every
Yeah.
night at 2:30 in the morning, because my neighbor sees them almost every night, and they hunt in pairs, and they've eaten all the cats and wildlife in the area. So basically, somebody's been feeding them apparently and drawing them into the park. So, you don't know who it is or when it is. My other neighbor's been trying to catch them or figure out who it is.
And that has been our biggest challenge as a law enforcement agency as well. We need to find out who it is. We need to prove it. Like the court system is set up in a way that can we prove that the element of defense? Can we prove who this person is? And even if I see you,
What if we
I
had
have
posters,
understood, yeah.
simple posters that said, warning, do not feed the coyotes, fine, $365, just something super, these are beautiful, it's all good.
We
But
do
what
have
about
those
something
signs.
for people maybe that don't have the time or just would see a sign and say, oh my God, I'm gonna get a $365 fine, I didn't realize. That could be just
So
something
we have
super simple.
We do have signs. We have signs, we even put infographics on them, right? However, the city is a big place, and so when you report it,
Yeah,
right, if you report it to 311, and
Yeah.
we'll look into it. The problem is as well, I don't want to get into the nitty
and
gritty.
if we can have laminated 8.5 by 11s posters that could go up like on whatever place.
Believe it or not, there's rules around putting up signs and postering and stuff like that. So, however, with that being said, if
Yeah.
there's a particular community that we have seen
Mhm.
issues with, and we would ask private property, hey, would you be
Right.
willing to hang the sign? If it's a city
Could
park,
go on
we've
your
asked,
fences, right?
yeah, we have asked parks to put signs
Yeah, if
up.
I can just comment on that, Minna. So, yeah, she can put signs anywhere, but if people don't obey the signs,
But I
like
think it
it's,
would be good maybe.
no, but it's like, the inspector has to be there. It's like the poop and scoop, right? People know we
Yeah.
put poop and scoop signs in the parks and that. How many people do you see walking their dogs and
But
they
it
don't?
could be that the one person that saw the sign 311 would put it two and two together.
Yeah.
That guy's feeding the wildlife. This is the 311 poster with the fine. I'm gonna be the one to report it. Because I think, there's lots of people that would. They just have to have that little bit of extra
No, you're right.
reminder.
Yeah,
Call
so
311.
Maybe that's
Call it in.
something, that's maybe something that the city can look at. So now we have another question here.
I have a question. Are they I think you're telling me they're attracted to garbage, right? To
Yeah.
organic garbage.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if in our parks, oftentimes we see, especially maybe after weekends, the garbages are overflowing. People have picnicked there, have brought
Yes.
their KFCs or whatever, and they're putting them in. Would it be advantageous to try to pick up the garbage a little more often?
That
Or
is,
maybe on a
Yeah.
Monday after a weekend or after
Yeah.
long weekends? Because, I mean, I walk in the park almost every day
Sure.
and the garbage is overflowing. And you've even got bins at the start of a green belt or something where it's not necessarily parkland,
Yeah.
it's a ravine or a green belt, but you've got bins there. So maybe, I'm not saying every park, but a park where there have been coyote spottings or where you've had some concerns, would it be worth it to say, instead of once a week pickup, it's twice a week, or for sure it's after the weekend, or we pilot a
Well,
program?
actually, you're right in that, because in some of the bins in the parks and that, you see people have barbecues and they just
Yeah.
throw their garbage in the
Yeah.
bins.
Maybe a summertime blitz.
Yeah, and so, yeah.
Or they're just dumping their, I hate to say it, they're dumping their extra.
Have it on
garbage.
Fridays and Mondays.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe
Parties,
something,
that's something that we can look at.
So
maybe
just to pilot it and
Yeah.
test it.
well,
Yeah.
it's
If
not
you
quite a
have a
pilot, because
particular
it's
park-
already kind of rolled out, right? And that's what I just wanted to notify you. Whenever we get any kind of complaints, whether it's for a schoolyard, especially where there's playgrounds and schools and stuff like that, we engage the school board and ourselves, we go out, my staff, we assess what's going on. And if we see that there's lots of overflowing bins, we report that to Parks. We're animal services, right? We do not clean up the bins, but we make sure that we contact the park staff and we make our recommendations, especially if there's sightings. And we would say, hey, we've got reports of sightings, can you please hang signs, can you please make sure the bins, and outside of that, that would be Councilman Ziada trying to get, but it's also a resource issue, and then also just a responsible, accountable to human behavior. Like, why can't we just clean up after us, or why can't we just put our dogs on leash because of the kind
No
of impact we're
offense,
having?
if that were the utopia we lived in, we wouldn't need bylaw officers.
Oh, no, I trust me, I know.
But we need bylaw to police the folks who
But-
don't do it.
And she's the bylaw.
No,
Animal
but-
services.
No, I'm not trying to take your dog away, I'm just saying.
Well, no, I do a lot of other
People
things with
don't
my
follow
time.
them.
No, people, you're right, people, and, I've seen people just eat and throw their garbage, I mean, it's ridiculous.
What's the fine for an
No,
overflowing bin?
hold on.
Is there a fine for
We're-
that,
We're
Francis?
here, just let us finish this. So, people are just throwing their garbage, I mean, it makes me sick, really.
It's-
What is the
So
fine for that,
sometimes
Francis?
I'm walking down Western Road and I see I'm picking up the garbage and putting it in the bins. So it really is a litter problem. We have one more question there.
Is
And then
what is the fine? It was
goes
the
to
same
second
question.
one.
What is the fine for overflowing garbage?
I don't know if there is a fine.
It would be
for that.
good
They're
to
not
also let
supposed
people
to
know.
pick the garbage up, you are supposed to bag tag it and put it beside it. But
Okay, we have a
nobody does that.
question here.
So I don't have a pet, but I do have regular coyotes coming into my backyard. And I'm very meticulous about not leaving any garbage. So even where the vicinity of where the coyotes hang around versus where the garbage is and where our neighbors, like we're very particular about ensuring that there is there. So what I'd love to understand is how do I mitigate and what are some of the tactics that you use to deter them over time? Because I know, like, they just started coming in the last, call it, maybe 6 months. And I just don't want them to start creating a den in that area. So the question is, what do I do to mitigate that?
Okay, so it's interesting that you asked that because I was just taking out, I was asked to go and look at a person's backyard who sees coyotes on a daily basis. So at 5 o'clock in the morning, I sat on her back porch and I waited. And sure enough, the coyote came in, jumped into her, remember the old compost bins that everybody used to
Yeah.
jumped in, got some French toast, and took off.
Oh my goodness.
So the thing was, there was no coyote issue. This was a person issue that had to be addressed. So if you have cameras,
Yes, I do.
okay, so if you were able to put the cameras up, it would really help to be able to see what is really going in your backyard. Do a check, make sure that nobody is on the trail behind your place leaving food. One location I went had 6 bags of food through the woods. So again, this is all because people want to see coyotes, other people don't. But a camera will tell you if the coyotes are coming at a specific time, or what are they actually doing in your backyard? Are they just walking through, or are they actually doing something in your backyard? What was the time that they were there, and what kind of garbage do you have?
So it's a great question, because like, those are things that I do observe. Because we also have a regular fox that comes by, and I don't
Yes.
mind the fox. Because the fox is very skittish, it's afraid, and I'm just like, good, we know each other's territory, we're good. But the coyote is a little bit different, because there was a couple times where I was blowing a whistle, or trying to like, like, keep my distance, but also like shoo it away as best as I could.
So we'll show you some.
We're going to show you a couple of techniques.
We'll show you a couple
But
of
I
things.
guess the point is that they come at various times during the day, so not only in the evening, but also during the
Right.
day itself.
Okay, so yours is a pathway that they're going through.
Well, so where I live is like, there's a lot of trees, and it's not far from Humber River, so
Okay.
I don't know, my hypothesis is that the construction that they're doing on Eglinton has now forced them to come
Yes,
towards.
and all of those factors are really important. If it becomes an issue for you, you can always send an email to Coyote Watch Canada,
Okay,
and I will come over and I'll do a field assessment behind you.
okay,
90% of the time, it's really obvious
okay.
what is the problem.
And sometimes you can't see, because like Diana said, we've gone out to addresses and we've seen on the other side of the fence or between the fence posts, somebody will dump bread or a sandwich, or there's somebody who's actually a staff member, they're passing through, they're leaving leftovers on the other side. We've seen, for example, abutting properties where fruit trees, believe it or not,
Yes.
unmaintained fruit trees is a big attractant because coyotes will eat it, right? And then also they're eating the animals that are eating the fruit, right? So sometimes it's not always that obvious. You're thinking, it's just I have an apple tree in my yard. But yeah, so the coyotes are coming.
It's fruit.
Oh, yes,
So
yes.
they,
New news to me, I didn't know that.
so also too, if it's at nighttime, in your backyard, would it help if you had a sensor light, the light comes on and it
I
scares
do,
them?
and
Yes,
it's-
I think
Doesn't do
that's
anything? Oh, so they don't care.
They'll get used to it.
Okay, so we have another question.
So I just wanted to put something quickly on there too, because people don't really think of this. I'll get to you right after, I just gonna finish responding to this one. Bird feeders. But your neighbors might, and they attract rodents. And just so to reassure all of you, the number one thing that coyotes eat is rodents, right? And that's one of the reasons why they're so beneficial in our cities. They eat a lot of rodents. Sorry, sir, what were you going to say?
Anybody who's in this room right now, if you have the 3 garbage containers that we use for waste. Get 2 bungee cords and cross and put them to the top lid and the side of the container. I've been doing it for 5 years. None of my garbage is ever torn apart. Nothing gets into my garbage, and I have nothing to worry about. So you have to be conscious of what you do with your garbage. If you leave it out, be prepared to deal with animals. It could be raccoons, squirrels, skunks, coyotes, or I don't know if you people have seen them, but also the coy wolves. Okay? So,
What?
coy wolves.
What the hell is that?
Coy wolf is a cross between that.
So we might have talked about that before you arrived, but we sort of dispelled the myth that the coy wolf doesn't really exist. It's more of a slang term.
So there is a trick.
So we'll talk about aversive conditioning. I'll let Anne and Jasmine go over this.
Anne's like a professional for this.
She really is. She chases coyotes for a
But
living.
I do want to thank, I just want to thank the gentleman for his comment about just making sure we're securing our garbage. Right, there's techniques of the ways to secure your garbage. You can contact solid waste to have your bins replaced if you are having that, or if you're living in a multi-residential building and you're finding that they're getting into the garbage, maybe having a conversation with the property manager. I know the last meeting I had, when Councilman Ziad over at London, she was referring to, it was interesting because by the end of the evening, they were talking about somebody up a couple of balconies that was feeding. Right? And they were throwing it, yes, they were throwing the food off.
Throwing the food over the balcony. In the building I live, they were throwing their food over the balcony.
Right? So suddenly, 2 and 2 started to come together, much like, for that unfortunate incidents that we do experience. And so there's little things that we can do, because what we're about to show you is aversion conditioning. But nothing will ride higher than an animal's desire to survive. And that is, and what do we need? We need food. So we can do all the aversion in the world, but if there's a million attractants of people continuing to feed, that's why we deal with these kinds of challenges from a holistic lens. We need a community response. We need everybody to know what to do with your garbage contained, to be dog on a leash, and if Mr. Coyote is feeling a little too comfortable or visit, like I said, explore what is it. It might not be you, it could be something happening nearby, and just making sure we're addressing those. So when we deploy aversion, reminding that coyote that people are scary, do not come close to me, that kind of lesson stays with the animal.
If coyote numbers are controlled by spading or neutering, it also helps.
How do we identify a coyote den? Like what are signs of it? Like, is there anything that, no?
Okay. They're usually very well hidden. Yes, they are, and they may have 3 or 4 that are in the area, and we don't know which one they're using. I have been doing this for 14 years, and I've never seen a coyote den.
Oh, okay. But
So,
Did you say you're not gonna GNR them? There's no trap neuter release plan in place at all?
These are wild animals, and
We're not
they've
gonna
been,
neuter them?
and they've been here a long time. They're very territorial. When their families grow out, they move out. And like I mentioned earlier, it's not that there's necessarily more of them. It's just that we have moved into their space, and there's less green space that we're sharing with them.
How come there's not more of them if there's pups being grown every year? How many?
And then there's the ones that die to natural attrition, through disease, hit by a car, or they move on out.
And mange, which if you've seen any of them that are missing fur, they look kind of, scabby and skinny looking. So dozens, we get, not dozens, we get hundreds and hundreds of calls at Toronto Wildlife Center every year about mangy coyotes. It kills a large number of their population. There really isn't as many of them. But, once they become visible, then you're seeing often the same ones.
Would it be less cruel to do some spraying or neutering of some kind? Would that allow the population that survives not to starve and get mangy?
It's very difficult to catch healthy coyotes to start with, even mangy coyotes.
Yeah.
Our team has been doing it for 20 years. They have a hard time catching them.
Yeah.
But also, it goes back to what Jasmine is talking about, that, we really, and not just for coyotes, for so many, our world is breaking, you guys, right? Like, we know this, right? So it's not just coyotes. We really need to start reflecting on our human behaviors, and really try to sort of live more peacefully in our green, like with our green spaces, promoting healthy ecosystems and living with our wild neighbors is part of living in those healthy ecosystems. We haven't brought this up yet, but if we remove coyotes from these areas, that's only opening up that space for a new coyote to move in. And that's exactly what will happen. If it's good coyote territory, a new coyote will move into that space.
You see a lot of coyotes at cemeteries too. You know where my parents are, there's so many coyotes and running around, and I think at a number of cemeteries that was mentioned earlier.
But if you go to a cemetery, which I have done, is you will see food at the cemetery stones. A lot of people leave food for their loved ones, so that is an attractant as well. You also have people that will go into the woods and leave food for coyotes because they want to take photos of it. But let's go on to aversion conditioning. What can you do to make a difference? I do this every day, and I always in my pocket I have a garbage bag.
So can we tell them when to do it though?
Yes,
Okay,
of course.
so before they show you what to do, so aversion conditioning is a way of teaching the coyote not to come close, but there are times that you should do this and times that you shouldn't. So for example, if a coyote is off in a hydro corridor, you know, a couple football fields away from you, that's a normal situation. It's hunting for its food, it's hunting to survive, it's hunting rodents most likely. That's a situation where you don't need to do anything. It's not up close in your space, it's in a normal space. We want to do the aversion conditioning when the coyotes are repeatedly coming too close, they're in your backyard, they're on your sidewalk, you know, coming into communities where they're not, they really shouldn't be. So keeping that in mind, we don't want to scare them all the time, but when they're in inappropriate
And
spaces.
definitely not the pups.
And not the young ones, yeah.
Okay, so one of the things that I do, and actually thank you for doing that, you fold it up like this, but before you do fold it up, make sure that you open the bag so that it's easy to get access to. I went out the other day to do this with a coyote. I opened it up, and the first thing that happened was the coyote came running towards me thinking I had food in the bag. Okay? So when you're doing it, you have to be very careful. As soon as I went, he was long gone. Okay? It's easy. You can do it with one hand. You can do it with two hands. You shove it in your pocket, and I guarantee you that they don't like it.
I had a village trainer that did that with his dog, and the coyote went nowhere. He had to pick up a stick and kind of, swirl it around as the coyote was kind of coming towards him and his dog. So it doesn't
Okay,
work.
so I've had no problems doing this. There are other techniques that you can use, and that is your stop. Go away, coyote, go away! And they do respond to this. I do this every day of the year.
She does, I can vouch for her.
Yeah.
She chases a lot of coyotes.
I may be old, I'm almost 70, I'm not in good shape, but I will go after a coyote to be seen on my street or anywhere there's issues going on. But the first thing I always do is make sure I have a bag in my pocket. I use the hand to tell him to go away. I use the bag to push him back. So for example, if the coyote was coming towards me, you're my coyote.
Scared me.
Yeah. So, and what I would be doing is I'd be saying, go away, coyote, go away. Okay?
I'm going away.
Just to address one of the other comments too, distance does play a factor. So if that coyote's all the way at the other end of the room and I'm slapping my bag around, coyote's like, I know I can run faster than you, right? You're not scaring me. I've chased a few coyotes as well, and there have been times where I've had to get within 3 or 4 feet of it. And I'm not suggesting that you have to do that, but I'm just as an example that sometimes, just like we're all different people and have different boundaries, so do coyotes, some will be closer than others.
And that's a great point, because I'm glad you meant the comment about, that's the number one comment I hear oftentimes when people, oh, it didn't work. But when we actually nail it down is, was it done correctly? And we'll talk a little bit about voice, and as Vicki mentioned about distance. Sometimes when you have a coyote that's been fed, if you have a coyote that has been fed and conditioned for a long time, sometimes when you do that the first time or 2 times, they may back up just a little bit because they're kind of figuring out. what they just figured out is like, oh, if she stops shaking the bag, oh, it's a 5 feet distance. No. Him back, you need to create that gap. And sometimes people stop too soon because they're scared. If they're nervous, your adrenaline's kicking in. And it kind of creates, and that goes back to what I said earlier about that mixed communication. So the guy's like, oh, was that a mistake? Especially one who's been fed for a long time. So it does take, like Vicki mentioned, probably need to do it a couple more times to really push that animal out. And when the animal is backing up, do not stop just because it stopped at the wall until it's retreating to a space that is appropriate.
I wish I had brought the video because I was doing some aversion. Do you have it?
I don't think I do.
I was doing aversion conditioning and there was 5 coyotes in an area. And I had a broken toe, my age, I'm overweight, and I had all of those coyotes, so as soon as I started walking towards them, go away! And I made sure that I was the one in control. He was not the one in control, and they were all gone.
Yeah, but if you can't see, you can't do that.
That's a good point, and I honestly don't have an answer for
So we're sitting ducks, the ones that
I
can't
have an
see.
answer for it, because I'm somewhat of an expert of coyote encounters. From 2019 till now, I must have had at least a dozen.
Wow.
And I'm like 7 feet away from them, and I've got my dog with me.
and picking them up.
You know, music. I put on Van Halen. Go ahead. And the 2 of them started running away.
And they don't stop and dance?
No, they didn't dance. So, you know, and I get big, and I get ferocious. The last experience I had, I picked up my dog with one hand, I had my big leopard coat on, they probably thought I was an animal too, because I started growling at the top of my lungs. But what was interesting was he's just staring at me going, what is this? Should I try to attack this thing too?
Yeah, I get it, but I can't see it. How can I see
Yeah, okay,
it?
but the music and the noise. It's the garbage bag noise that's getting them. So anything that you've got that makes noise, your voice makes noise.
Yeah.
I go out at midnight walking my dog. I've got an umbrella in my hand, partially open, ready to go. Woof! I've got music on. And I've got strobe lights on.
So Vicki has
awesome.
really, yeah, so sorry not to interrupt you, but Vicki has a really important point. So I'm just gonna let her jump right in.
Okay.
So we have to remember these are urban coyotes, right? So they've probably heard Van Halen for some other reason blasting from somebody's car before, right? So that's kind of what we have to remember too. That's why this is different. It's because it makes an unusual visual for them. It's an unusual sound for them. And it looks aggressive. Really, right? If somebody's doing that in your face. So yeah, that's why like sometimes honking, sometimes even like if they're used to people talking, it might not be as effective as something like this.
And just even with the scream, and this is not, you know, it's going to be a little animated, but it's a reality. I see it. I watch people are fearful, especially if it's their first time, and they may be trying. Yeah, right. But that's really. It's important because when people panic, we do kind of get a little squeaky and a little high pitched, which is not as, you know, right? I'm exaggerating.
It sounds like some gear bit being.
Right? Right? You think about people, most time when we're panicking or people are scaring, your cadence line versus something a little bit more assertive, like Andrea did. Get away! Get away! Very different experience.
Gosh, use your voice.
Like I'm feeling.
I'm sorry, I think there was another question. Did you have a question, sir? I think.
Somewhere
I
through
lost
this,
my
I
voice
read,
in 2 days.
and I'm
I
trying to
got
figure out,
there
coyotes are
from
wolves,
Brown,
you're supposed to
so
get down and scrape
so
the
maybe
ground
we'll
like you're a bull and raise your hands up, and I heard that they will run. Is that for coyotes or is that for wolves?
Okay, so the question was, should you get low and sort of like taken on an intimidating, like hated kind of pose? No. There's a dog loose. So the reason for that is even if you get on the floor with a dog like that, this is I'm staring at you, I'm down on your eye level for dogs, for canids, bad, right? That's like I'm threatening you.
Straight, and then all of a sudden stand up with your hands raised. That's what I was trying to figure
So,
out.
yeah,
So
just
they're
stay
trying
tall
to
the whole
emulate a
time.
Yeah,
bull,
it's just like
and that's
the
it.
lady at the back mentioned, which is to stay big, stay loud, stay assertive, and if you need to, maybe just make a few steps forward. And unfortunately, sometimes what we find is while your people are panicking or thinking what to do, when there is that pause, the coyote's also pausing. Because they don't know, because especially if they've been fed for a while, they're trying to figure out if you're friend or foe. Because she was a friend, she was a friend, he was a friend. And why is this one making the sound now? So sometimes if there is a pause, they also pause, and people go, and it's kind of like a stare down. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do?
Who's gonna draw first?
Yeah, but it creates confusion. The coyote's figuring it out for you today because they don't know who is from who. They're trying to survive. They're super smart. And so sometimes it's really important. That's why we're sharing this information. If you do encounter one, or you hear somebody's encounter one, just get your little garbage bag full, especially if you're going to a space where you know they are, and just get right on there and don't miss a beat. Just get that coyote out of there.
So we have a question from Levan.
Yeah, so I guess my question is, thank you for this information, it's been great. Just, I guess from a school perspective, because there has been some sightings in the school, would there be any unique or particular strategy that they could take in a school setting, or would it be ultimately this?
One of the things that I find when we go out to the schools, unfortunately, they're children, they're always dropping food and stuff.
Yes.
Right, so it's just really important that your groundskeeper, your maintenance staff stay on top of it. This school in very particular, one of the first things we all said was, look what's out there. Right, so we really want to make sure that there's no reason for them to necessarily come too close, but they will at this school. And I'll let the ladies maybe give you some other tips.
Yeah, I mean, for Toronto Wildlife Center, we'll go to schools and have talks to the kids about coyotes and how to behave appropriately and what to do, which is quite, it's the same thing. Get big, get loud, garbage bags, screaming, that kind of thing. But like Jasmine said, making sure the schoolyard is clean. And mostly, like the biggest thing that as educators, you can educate them about coyotes is not running away. Because that's what we often see kids do, and then that's going to cause a chase instinct in the coyote, not necessarily to even hurt the child, but that's just like a dog, if a child runs in a dog will chase. Same thing with coyotes. So.
I always have the question, how many of us have to try to catch our dog by running the opposite way? like I'm going now, Fluffy, I'm going, and suddenly you start running, and you're like, oh, you came. Because maybe if you keep chasing it, then he runs, and this is a game to him, and it's so that it's almost like I joke about the Canada DNA. It's like there's like a biblical thing in their DNA. You run, I shall chase.
I just have one other comment. I work with the schools in my neighborhood as well. I go in and we do just basic trainings. Kids go outside, they spread their legs, they put their hands up, they clap their hands, they snap the bag, and go away, coyote, go away! But the school also has a system that if there is a coyote in the back, they do ring the bell. And that is a good thing. Whistles do not work, okay?
Stay a few more minutes.
Whistles do not work.
Do not work. If you think about where you see coyotes in parks, the thing is that they are seeing, kids are playing there, they leave food behind. So the whistle from the baseball team or the soccer means that food is now in this area. So as soon as they whistle, they know that there's something going to be left behind. So as soon as the kids are gone, they're going right in. So whistles are no good whatsoever. Yeah, don't use a whistle.
Maybe we can hand some brochure to lady at the back, but before we do that, I just want to say, there's another issue that we have. I know we have that issue up in Weston, and we have it all over the city, is rats.
Right.
You notice a lot more rats up?
Yep.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah.
There are a lot of rats.
Maybe we should get more coyotes.
The rats are coming from the number of construction that's going on. When you have the city doing sewer work, or you got Metrolинks digging up Eglinton Avenue, so you come with the rats. So because this has been an issue, and it's been an issue citywide, and I know that I've had a lot of complaints, especially up in the Weston area and in this area, that they've seen far more rats than they ever have. So there's a report coming forward to council in the summer, and because other councillors are experiencing the same thing. So what we're going to do is we can only mandate it when there's city work being done. If the city's hired a contractor to do any sewer work or road work and they have to dig up, then we can mandate this, but we can't mandate it if it's a private owner that's building a new house or what. So what we're gonna recommend, any construction that's being done by the city, and the city hires a contractor, is that when they dig up, they're going to put birth control into wherever they're excavating, and that will help. And that report's coming forward in the summer, because I know that there's been a lot of complaints about it, you know, Weston Lawrence, and we're having that even at Eglinton and Western Road. We got the Eglinton line, they've been digging. So you see, a lot of people are experiencing more rats running around. And so I just want to let you know that. So it's a coyote, but it's a rat. And when I say rat, I'm talking about the animal, not the people.
And then, and then the city also decided to catch the cats too, right?
Because I know in Greenbrook, in that area, I've been getting calls about rats, you know, and especially if you have a ravine and that. So I just wanted to mention that before we went to the last question. Hold on. There's a woman, and then you can go next. There's a woman at the back that has a question. Did you have a question?
I think it's being addressed.
Pardon?
It's being addressed.
Oh, okay, Mike.
Are you going to do pigeons too?
Well, pigeons, yes. We did have a pilot. Yeah, we did have a pilot. And with some of the BIAs, and you know, at Weston Lawrence, I don't know if people know the Weston Lawrence area where people feed the pigeons and you have all this pigeon poop all over the place, right? And even at Jane Park Plaza here, I don't know if you go to Jane Park Plaza, you see people sitting on the benches and feeding the pigeons. So there is a report coming back on that too, how we can prevent that. So that's also an issue. But here we go again, people feeding, right? And this is why you have to follow.
What about the ones underneath the bridge on Eglinton?
And also for the over control, like the pigeons, probably not the most glorious way to describe them, but they're like the cockroach or the bird worm, right? You just can't, they're just everywhere, right? And they're resilient, and there's a mixed population of pigeons between the wild pigeon and the pigeons that were homing and just released, and they're kind of just joining those flocks. And then there's the feeding and the food. So for the over control, for example, to work, it will again require some kind of community efforts for buildings and properties and businesses to set up either, as part of their pest control process, because there are certain companies like Able and Orchid who are licensed to sell this type of over control. But and usually those companies are associated with your other pest management anyways. You just need to let them know you also want to add the pigeon on it, so whether it's a duff coat, which is a little different, or if you want to just put up a feeder to implement that, the birth control for pigeons, which is the over control. And over time, you should see that population start to decline. It's not I think unfortunately with our society, we're so set that we want everything now. And the expectation is if we put it up in 2 weeks, I shouldn't see any pigeons. Unfortunately, that's kind of not the way it works. And over time, we should see a gradual reduction in the flocks.
I'll just add to that from a wildlife center perspective. Keep in mind though, pigeons are one of the main food sources for hawks, for example, right? Red-tailed hawks. We need some of them around our city, right? Like healthy populations are good for our birds of prey and other wild animals that might depend on them for food as well. Same thing with rats. You know, if we had no rats left, then we might see some other wild populations going down. So I know when there's too many, it can be sort of burdensome, but we just really have to keep in mind again those kind of like interactions in our ecosystem, even in our city ecosystem. It is an ecosystem here, right? We have green spaces, we have lots of different interactions happening. So just kind of keeping that in mind too when we're thinking about these populations.
The worst thing I see about the coyotes too is that the coyotes have no predator in the city. So therefore they can multiply as they wish.
Not really, because the mange affects them pretty terribly.
Okay.
Terribly. It really keeps their numbers down. And roads as well, a lot get killed on roads.
Yeah,
so.
we pick up a lot of them by road, so by car, and it's also not. I will let Vicky and correct me if I'm wrong. If we take it from a survival kind of lens, they're not going to just keep procreating and everybody, the family just keeps getting bigger, because then there's less taxing on resources as well. There's only so much food to go around, and that's why the families eventually do move out. And hey, I live here, this is my 5 kilometers, you're gonna have to move 10. So eventually, and between all of this, when we have the families, like we talked about, many of them died from mange, other diseases, hit by a car. Pups may just never make it to adulthood. There's just different challenges that wildlife experience. It's a scary world out there if you ever watch a Discovery Channel, right? So just making it to adulthood alone is an accomplishment in itself.
Yeah, I mean, just for example, with calls, and when there have been calls of coyotes, for example, we know that they have larger litters because this has now opened up more space for them, right? So
I have 2 quick questions. One is, when is mating season?
now,
And the second question, does it make sense to call 311 if there's a coyote sighting, or what's your guidance on that?
Everybody look for me, yeah, absolutely there is. So when you call the 311, absolutely, because we do, just even if you're just reporting the sighting, now sometimes those sightings could be you're calling, and you guys all live in the same area, but it's the same coyote was walking down the street, and they may look like, oh my God, there's 10 sightings, but y'all 10 of you is calling by the same coyote. So that's why the numbers are not always truly, because we don't vet every one of them, but what it does do is we monitor, like from like a heat mapping perspective, and if we see that there is an area that there's a lot of sightings coming up, we start proactively responding to that before we end up in an issue, because if there's a lot of sightings, I know there was one, I pronounced it wrong the last time, don't crucify me, Baby Point or Batty Point. All right, when they were
up the street.
Yes, when they were replacing all those, the sewers underneath in the ravines, and we got tons of complaints up on the road. Everybody was like, what was going on? And we were trying so hard, and then I looked at them and I was like, there's construction in the ravine. I went out there and there's like 10 bulldozers, 3 excavators, hundreds of crews. I'm like, right? So sometimes it makes sense, and of course as soon as the crews left, so did the complaints. But then we want to make sure that in the meantime, while those coyotes are figuring out what to do, they don't decide to stay, because everybody's going to keep their garbage clean, keep their dogs on the leash, and anybody who decides that they're going to hang out a little longer, we're going to deploy aversion condition to make sure we push them back out of our space. So yeah, we do map those as well.
So we have approximately another few minutes. So if do you have any further questions, or?
I think fines should be higher to stop people from feeding them, and signs could work if people know how to read them and pay attention to them. So, I don't know.
Yeah, PR campaign, I think, it would really help, because I think it's just, people just aren't aware. They like to feed this animal, they don't realize there's a side effect to the other species. So I think that might be just, don't feed anything, or there's a fine, and just really drive that home, maybe do some, higher and, higher level media relations.
on that note, a lot of people we encounter think that the wildlife actually need to be fed, that they're starving. We hear that a lot.
Right.
So in your communities, reassure them that they are able to find their own food.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that also goes for water. If you're leaving out water poles, then you're providing service for the animals in your neighborhood. So don't put out water, don't put out bird seed unless you've got something to catch it underneath. And honestly, if you're really concerned, look up on the websites for all of us. We have a Coyote page, talks about a lot of different things. You can always leave a question on the page and somebody will get back to you.
Just one quick observation regarding your promotional or signing campaign. Most people don't take notice of those. Counselor, you know, you send out mailings and people don't read them. But there are certain things.
But they do read them because they came to the meeting.
Yes. But all I'm saying is there are certain things that people will take notice of. Perhaps your tax bill.
Yeah,
Your
fine.
utility bill, I don't know if the city can do this, but in bold letters on the top, fine for leaving out food for wildlife, $365 or $1,000.
I like that.
And I'm just saying that that's what people take notice of. But
Once it hits
you
them in the
send out a
pocket.
mailer and it's, I'm sorry, but, oh, the game's on, okay, bye. I gotta pay my tax bill. I've gotta pay
It's
my
a great
utility.
idea, and then an idea for towns.
But big bold letter across the top of the
This
We
gentleman.
have a question over here.
It's actually not a question.
Comment.
I acknowledge that this is a good interaction about awareness on Coyote. But thinking about it, maybe we further need to educate the people more
Yeah.
on what to do and what not to do.
Yeah.
Like, we need to acknowledge that these are wild animals. So it will be on our part to do things that needs to be done. Right?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Thank
That's
you.
why I'm, that's why we commend sometimes the island for trying to arrange more of these and, and a bigger space, because I know the last year we had it was crowded, but unfortunately it was a happy game on.
Well, the last one we had it at Lambda Square. We had about 50 residents there. And that's why I'm trying to host these meetings, and I put it in my emails, trying to get as many people. I mean, I had one negative comment on Facebook. It says, oh, is that the most important thing for you? Like, stupid comments like that, right?
We can focus on lots of things at the same time.
One of the things
Some
that
people.
the city of Toronto has on their site, and we have on ours, is an e-learning. It takes 20 minutes. It goes all through what to do if you see a coyote, what he's made, and it's free. You just go on City of Toronto Coyotes, and it's a great video. We also have it on Coyote Watch Canada.
And the unfortunate part, and the very truth about human behavior, because we deal with human behavior at the end of the day, to your point, which is most people don't pay attention until it started to affect them. Like, I don't see a coyote, what do you mean? I see them over there, but most of the people don't look at the signs. It's kind of, if you're going to buy a yellow car, suddenly start seeing yellow cars everywhere. You're like, why? I didn't know there was so much yellow cars on the road. So, if you're gonna, if I start seeing coyotes and they start impacting me, I start seeing it in my neighborhood, then they may go up on Eli, even if that. I have sent out e-learning to people, and they've basically told me to just do something else with my time. But it's kind of, unfortunately, we need people to, yes, to get ahead of the information, but it's a reality that most people don't listen until it starts to impact.
Okay,
So what if we could download, that you guys could do a sign, and we could download it and print it at home and put it up ourselves?
If you reach out to me, I will absolutely send you the PDF.
Like, I'm thinking of just a poster that would say, there's a fine for feeding wildlife. And
So, I have an infographic method, so we don't have to worry about like language.
actually, websites are great.
So what I want to say, I want to thank everyone for coming, but if you have any personal questions about staff, to hear, you can go up to them and ask them, because the permit is only take 30. So.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for coming. I have to go by the rules, right?